Welcome to Book Huddle. I'm your host, Karen Reader with Readgab. Today we have Ben Guterson on with us. He is the author of the world famous Nine, and the sequel just barely came out, and I just barely finished it. I'm so excited to talk about it. The Shadow of the World Famous Nine. He's written other books as well. It seems like your thing is middle grade mystery, right?
Absolutely. That's my sweet spot. I really enjoy writing for young people in that age group, and I'm really into mystery, suspense, codes, puzzles, all that kind of fun stuff.
Oh, that's so fun. And there's so many more puzzles in this book. So I can't wait to talk about this. But first, Ben, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you separate from being an author.
Well, I was born and raised in Seattle, went to the University of Washington. I'm a Husky. I actually was a school teacher for many years. Out of college, I taught for public high school 7 years on the Navajo Nation in New Mexico, and then I taught at a small K through 12 school for a few years in southern Colorado. I worked at Microsoft for many years and I came back up to the Northwest. But I quit Microsoft about 10 years ago when I became a full-time writer, and I've been enjoying it ever since. That's kind of the brief bio. I'm a big tea drinker. I love to drink tea. That's
Nice.
kind of my thing. I really enjoy that. I like to swim. I love swimming laps or swimming in the river, the lake or something. So
Nice.
yeah, that's just a little bit about me, I guess, aside from being an author.
I like, and that was reflected a little bit in the nine, a few of the characters at different points are drinking tea. So
Yeah,
I like those
no
little
doubt.
to find out that that's something the author enjoys and to see that there.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do an author icebreaker. We're going to do Ink Heart. This is one of my favorite series. Oh, it's right behind my head here. And so Cornelia Funke's just amazing author. But in the book, the characters are pulled into another book. So Ben, you get to choose a book that you would love to be pulled into and physically live in their world, or one that you'd be like, never when I want to go
Okay.
there.
Well, I'm a big fan of Cornelia Funk as well, and think she's fantastic, a wonderful writer from Germany, written so many beautiful kids books. But if I could be pulled into a book, I will choose a very old series called Swallows and Amazon by an Englishman, Arthur Ransom.
I've
And the re
never heard of it.
Well, it's not that popular anymore, frankly. It's about
Okay.
100 years old.
Oh,
He
well.
wrote, I think there's about 11 books in the series. They were massively popular at one time, particularly in England, where I think they probably still are. The books are like ridiculously out of date, frankly. Pretty like corny, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I just really like how the brothers and sisters and all the kids in those books get along. They're really plucky and they always
Yeah.
having fun adventures, and their imagination kind of goes in all these directions. I don't know that the books would appeal to that many kids today, but the books are so innocent and so charming, and the kids always have so much fun and figure so many things out, and they're always getting along so well. It just seems like a really fun kind of I write middle grade books because I really love that time of life, and
Yeah.
I look back at it very fondly. And those books return me to that period, sort of mentally and emotionally in my life. Lots of
Me.
other books do as well,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that series really does it for me. The book that I would not want to go into is The Phantom Toll Booth by Norton
Oh,
Juster. I read it
yeah. Good choice.
I
Not to
read
go
it when
there.
I was, like in third or fourth grade, and I loved it and still love it.
Right.
But there's some scary parts of that book. I remember there's this weird faceless zombie guy counting grains of sand and trying to trap the boy, and that was scary when I was a kid. So
Right.
I would not want to go there. So there you go. That's my icebreaker.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, that's definitely one that I wouldn't want to go to. I think there's probably more books I wouldn't want to be in than be in.
I'm with you.
Like, because there's so many intense, or especially since I love fantasy and dystopian, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't want to live there. I just want to read about it and never go there. All right, so tell us what the world famous nine, and then a little bit about what the sequel's about.
The two books or the series is it's set in the largest department store in the entire world, named the Number Nine Plaza, but everyone just calls it the Nine for short. So that's why I call the books the World Famous Nine and the Shadow of the World Famous Nine. I've set the department store. It's 19 stories tall and has all these fabulous things in it, a Ferris wheel on the top, and candy shops and bakeries and bookstores and pet stores and clothing and just everything you could imagine in this
Right.
enormous emporium. and people come from everywhere because it's just such an incredible place. But I've situated it sort of in a very fictional southern Siberia, but it's not, I never really name it. Big metropolis, in sort of in Siberia.
Okay.
And the store is owned and operated by a woman named Zena Weinby. The Weinby family has run this place for over 100 years. And Zena's grandson, Xander Olenga, comes there for the summer. His parents are scientists and they're off on some research
Right.
project. And so he's looking forward to all kinds of fun. But there's a legend that this family heirloom, this magical object, might resurface while he's there. And there's also these legends of this sort of weird spirit force, evil force that has sort of been haunting the store in the past, might be wanting to get his or its hands on this object. And Xander wants to make sure that doesn't happen. So
Right.
in the first book, he teams up with a new friend he makes named Natasha, and they hopefully kind of keep the bad guy away from the bad object. In the second book, it turns out that the bad guy is back a little bit stronger than ever. So they have to really draw on all their resources and become even closer friends to thwart this evil spirit named Darkbloom, who's even more menacing, I guess, in the second
It
book. So
is.
that's yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of what it's about. I will mention, of course, I'd love it if people read both books, but in all I had a series out called Winter House, a
Yeah.
trilogy, and even in those books, I tried to make it the case that someone could just pick up any book and kind of jump in and kind of be situated well enough that they could move forward. Obviously, I'd love it if people read the first book, the
Absolutely.
World Famous Nine, but they could probably just pick up the Shadow of the World Famous Nine and jump in. So
Right.
that's kind of the overview.
That's so cool. And it's so unique. The department store adventure, right? This big grand department store that's almost like something would be more in Las Vegas, that it has amusement rides on the top, a carousel and a Ferris wheel. And there's so much going on, so much
Yeah.
throughout the store. There's a radio station and it's so all inclusive and it's just so unique because kids don't really think that way anymore because we're in an age where we buy everything online. There's so few stores and certainly fewer and fewer department stores. And so
Yeah.
thing that they're like, whoa, this is fantastical, even the
It-
department store.
Well, if anyone goes to a place similar to that, now it'd be a shopping mall, which is fine. That's sort of
Right,
the new incarnation, I guess. Those are generally flat, and you walk
right.
along and there's different stores that you're passing along the way, it's totally different franchises or whatnot. But there used to be department stores all over the United
Yeah,
States and I guess around the world, and a lot of them are defunct and they've long since, disappeared. But they were generally taller buildings with shops on each floor,
right.
a little more integrated and sort of coherent than a shopping mall, which is just a lot of very discrete separate units.
Yeah,
So to me, a department store, no matter what floor were on, it kind of all had the same, like you felt like you were in one place, even though it was
yes,
different on each floor. So I just decided I would set the story in a big, huge department store because I remember them, especially in downtown Seattle when I was a kid. There
right.
were there were two really grand old department stores there, and in my mind, I thought those were cool places. It might be fun to set a story in a location like that.
Yeah, and such a fun adventure for the kids at the beginning, the kids are just exploring and having a
Right.
good time, and there's just so much to explore. One of the lines that I like that is used is it's not just to shop, but it's the experience of going to the department store. And I love that.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
Well, you go to a mall, and again, I'm not putting down malls. They're great. You can buy stuff and look around, and they're a lot of fun, and they do have some atmosphere, and some
Right,
maybe try to have that atmosphere more than others. But I remember department stores when I was a kid, and it was like an experience. You'd
right.
go there, especially around the holiday time, and they were all done up a certain way, and it did fill me as a kid with that sense of wonder, that real enchantment to be in these stores. They smelled great. There was music going. Everything's dressed up, for the holiday season, and I like that feeling of like, the owners of the place want you to buy stuff. That's why
Yeah, of
they're in
course.
business,
That's
but
the point.
but they also want you to feel like, you're stepping into something a little bit magical, especially around the holiday
Right.
time. So yeah, that sense of wonder I think is important.
Yeah, I think that's why, Christmas time holidays make such good things to write about because that sense of just magic. So
Right.
to have a setting, a sense of magic that it really transitions well to the
Yeah.
fantastical setting.
Mhm.
So the puzzles are especially big. in this book. And it was so fun. Like I said at the end, I was having to keep reading and keep going. I was like, oh, I have time to figure out my puzzles. But
Yeah.
the puzzles are so fun because just like Xander, you can either look ahead and figure out what they are, or you can figure them out yourself.
Yeah.
And so tell me about creating these puzzles. Were you researching puzzles? How did this go?
I have worked puzzles and wordplay and games and codes and ciphers into all of my books. I
Mhm.
just sort of realized I just like that stuff a lot.
Right,
And I think I've always found it a lot of fun. I used to play Scrabble like with my mom. She was really good at Scrabble and, word games. And I like to do certain types of crossword puzzles now called cryptic crosswords. They
nice.
have these sort of interesting wordplay clues in them. And I just like all that stuff a lot. I've always done anagrams in my mind. I kind of often, maybe too often, I'm rearranging words in my mind. And I find this really fun. I just sort of thought, well, maybe if I do, young readers or any readers will
Yeah,
as well. So I've worked them into all my books, the Winterhouse books. I had a standalone called The Einsteins of Vista Point, and now these two 9 books. I've really tried to load them up with puzzles. I think the latest book, The Shadow of the World Famous Nine,
right.
has the most puzzles in it. I really got into coming up with all these kinds of cool things. I guess I do research only in the sense that, anyone can get online and just sort of find cool puzzles everywhere.
Right.
But I definitely come up with my own.
That's
I
cool.
don't want to like, repurpose someone else's thing or something or take something from someone. So I came up with my own. There's even some visual puzzles in there. I won't give
Yes,
this away, but
I really I had to get the tangible book and I was like, okay, if I hold it just right
yeah.
while I see it, because when I was a kid, those books were so popular that you would kind of go cross-eyed and hold
Oh,
it.
the magic eye. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could hardly ever see them.
Yeah,
And
so
so
I
I was
did a Magic
determined and
Eye
I saw
one.
yours.
I think the third Winterhouse book, I worked in a Magic Eye one, which is really
Uh-huh.
hard to do.
Right.
But in the Shadow of the World Famous Nine, there's a little bit of a different visual one.
Yes.
So I try to do different kinds of puzzles, throughout, and then it all sort of culminates in a cipher that
Yes.
Xander has to figure out at the end of the book. And I'm not going to give anything away, but I tried to connect it to a cipher that he solves in the first book. And I hope that when readers reach that point in the second book, if they've read the first one, I hope in the second book they'll be like, whoa, I did not see that coming. I tried to
Right. And
create
it's
kind of like
so
this.
exciting.
Yeah, so I hope it would be kind of like fun for readers, like, oh my gosh, but I can't, obviously, Karen, you've read the book. I can't give too much away or else it might ruin the surprise
Yes, and
for
ex
readers.
ruin
But
that experience. But I, as a teacher, let me just tell you that I'd love so much to have students reading in the class and then all of a sudden see them going like,
yeah, yeah.
just holding the book at different angles and trying to
Yeah.
figure things out because it's about the eye and how you're able to see things.
Yeah.
And so it'd be so fun to watch a reader doing that. I think
Yeah.
my husband was laughing at me as I was trying to figure out the puzzles because he's like,
Yeah,
what are you doing with that
yeah,
book? And I'm
yeah.
like, I gotta find the puzzle.
That's good. That's good. It's fun. I really like working them in. So, yeah, absolutely.
So I love this theme of willpower in the book, and that this one spiritual character, and we'll just put aside whether people believe in the supernatural or not, because you
Right.
don't need to believe in this to go with this theme. All right. So others, their actions, their words, they influence our minds, whether for good or bad, right? And
Yeah.
so, how are we in control of our own minds? And you kind of roll with this theme throughout the book. So let's talk about being
Yeah.
in control of ourselves.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. I was thinking about that a bit. I'm not real heavy on messages in books or
Right.
where, but
So
but I
it's
do.
almost like they accidentally happen.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's good and appropriate to kind of promote maybe more positive approaches people can take, especially kids who might be reading the book. So, yeah, in this story, there's this spirit, Dark Bloom, and he seems to be pulling the strings, behind the scenes a little bit, more so in the first book and more explicitly in the second book. So, your question, like, well, how much control do we have? Xander, the hero of the book, throughout, is sort of learning about what does it mean for me to have control and like agency, I guess a real popular word now, in my own life and not be controlled by other people. Like in the
Yeah.
first book, it's like, how can I overcome some fears that I have, And
Yes.
he thinks like, I'm in control of this. I mean, there are a lot of things that influence us or that we don't have control over, the accidents or whatnot, but some things we can control. And he learns how to sort of like calm down some of his fears in the first book. And in the second book, it's more about how can he try to develop his own willpower and his own mental and emotional strength to make sure that he doesn't get controlled by outside influences. And I personally, I would never want to like push that message too hard on kids, but I really think in a large way that's sort of what life is all about. I mean, there's all these influences around us. We can be controlled by anything out there, and obviously people who are addicted may be completely controlled by outside influences. But I'm a big believer that the more we can understand what's controlling us or influence us on the outside, the more we can understand it and work to corral that inside of ourselves, we can have a better life, maybe. And that's a journey we're all on. I'm on that journey, but the more we can keep our minds clear about what we want to be and how we want to progress in our lives and not let whatever it is, entertainment, the attitudes of other people, other people's opinions or whatever, just crowd us out, I think is a win. So that's kind of what's going on in the book. And Xander has to really, really work hard to keep his mind steady, or he's going to be swayed or influenced or even maybe even destroyed by this spirit, Dark Bloom, in the book.
I love what you're saying, that first and foremost, you don't want to bog down kids with messages, that you want them to just enjoy this book, right? Is that what you're saying?
No
That's
doubt. I heard the writer Isabel Allende, she writes for adults. She wrote a really
okay.
famous book called The House of the Spirits and lots of others. But anyway, I heard a podcast recently. She said something that's been in my mind ever since. She said, the best way to ruin a good book is to try to insert a message in it. And I've heard
Right.
variations on that
Yes.
idea many times over the years, but just hearing her say it recently kind of brought it back to me. So
Nobody
yeah,
wants a
Karen,
didactic book.
yeah. But yeah, I think I'm interrupted you, but what
No,
you were
you're
on that
great.
same message.
So yeah, that first and foremost, a reader of any age should be able to just enjoy the book and not have to
Right.
worry about messages. I
Right.
absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
That's my top priority in my life for my own kids and then in promoting kids reading is just love it. I
Yeah.
just hope you'll love it. And I want to help you find those books that you can love because we all have some different interests and some different ways we enjoy reading. But after that, there might be instances where they're willing to talk about it. And
Right.
so my son had read a book for school because, often you have to read so many books in school. And I like that a lot of schools give them free choice. And so after school, he knew I had already read it. And so I just said, "Oh, did you like the book? What did you think?" And then he let the conversation keep going. So I was able to say, "Oh, what did you think about when this happened? Was that weird to you at all?" And so rather than just like picking up, this is a message. But then as
Right.
teachers do need to do their jobs. And so that's one of the reasons I love to talk themes is what can we do for higher level thinking? What can
Right.
we do for making it life applicable? And so I like that about, being in charge of your own brain and in your
Yeah.
own mind. And
Yeah.
yeah, things are going to influence us, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we grow is by
Yeah.
influences of other people. But the
Yeah.
important thing is to choose what we're going to
Exactly.
let stay in our
Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. I mean, I really think kids especially turn to books for the pleasure of
yes.
of entering into a new experience, I think if they feel that the author is on a soapbox and kind of hammering some message, maybe they will feel the book's a little stiff. And I don't know that books can sometimes get captured in their own era and have concerns that are only applicable for a brief time, and then they may not stay in people's imagination. If a book is purely entertaining, it's a diversion for, a few hours, and then it may be forgotten. So I
Right.
do think it's good that if a book can have a little bit more depth to it
Right.
without having an explicit moral that's being pushed down
Oh my
someone's
gosh.
throat. Those are the books that stay with us. You're like, wow, I love that story. I was completely
Yes.
there, just lost in that other world. But I'm still thinking about some of the stuff that went
Yes.
on and what the main character went through. I like those books the best. They're both entertaining,
Yes.
and there's a little meat there that you can kind of contemplate afterwards. Those ones are the most powerful ones that have stayed with me, for years and years.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that. And those are the ones that you want to reread, right?
Right.
Because you go
Right.
back and you just had a great experience, so you want to go have a good experience again. The second time you read it, it's like, oh, wow, look at
Yeah.
this. I'm able to see it in another light.
Yeah.
Phrase
Yeah.
that is in
Exactly.
your book a lot. So yeah, I love it. I think it's so fantastic. And I love that throughout the book, uh, in different forms, we're talking about ways of calming the mind. And it's
Hmm.
just said in passing most of the time. I mean, later it becomes a big message, but leading up to that, there's just a couple characters that are like, well, yeah, I just, I think one without saying meditate, she talks about,
Right.
exercising her
Right.
brain and her thoughts. And so, but I like also that it's about like calming, like one works origami and
Right.
one's swinging and
Yeah.
one's doing the art. And so
Yeah.
these things, it's important for our brains to have breaks and to get lost in something that we so completely love
Yeah.
and let our brain have a break and rest.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what Xander's absorbing these messages from other people while he's already pretty good at it himself, but then it plays a crucial role at the climactic moment of the book when he really has to think about, I need full concentration here in order to succeed at the to stave off the danger I'm facing right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And I like what I just inserted, the seeing things in another light. That comes up multiple times. And I have that really big for me in my life with interacting with adults because we often take things the wrong way, maybe. We're like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, she or he said this or did this. And I think that happens for middle grade readers that we're so
Yeah.
worried about who says and does what. And so
Yeah.
we've got to look at things another way. In this book, it's about puzzles, but it's
Right.
also sometimes it's about another character. Like, what's going on with you? I've got
Yeah.
to approach this differently.
Well, that's another thing in the story. Xander he examines, he and his friend Natasha there, they keep encountering lots of different puzzles because there's this old newsletter that used to
Yes.
circulate in the Nine, and they get a hold of like this stash of all these old volumes of it, and they're having a lot of fun looking at them because one of the characters who actually played a key role in sort of getting the mystery started decades before, he had published all these puzzles in this newsletter. So Xander and Natasha are like, wow, these puzzles are so cool. And then they start realizing, like, there's something else going on here. Like maybe this guy is sort of putting certain messages in here, and maybe we need to look at things in a different way, and that
Wow.
helps them eventually re-examine some of the clues they've already. So it's fun to look at the puzzles in the book and for the kids, but it starts to expand their vision a little
Yes.
bit. And then what do you know? That helps them solve things down the road. And it's so true. Like I like every morning in the newspaper I look at, there's it's called the jumble or the jamble. I think it's called the jumble. It's like anagrams. It's like
Okay.
the words are all mixed up. And I look at them every morning, and a lot of times I can do them really fast.
Yes.
They're usually it's like two 5-letter words and two 6-letter words. And
Right.
generally, just because I've done this a lot, I can get them pretty much right away. But sometimes even a 5-letter word, I'll look at it and I can't figure it out. And it
Right.
takes me, and then I realize, you know what? It's because I'm getting stuck on a certain path.
Yes.
I'm only putting words or letters together a certain way. I need to just step back and completely redirect. It's a
Yes.
very small example, but going through that for me is sort of what informed the approach Xander and Natasha to
Right.
take in the book because I had that experience, frequently. You're trying to solve a puzzle or a riddle. We've all been there, right? You hear a riddle and you're
Yes.
like, hmm. And then when the answer is given to you, you're like, oh, that's so obvious.
Right.
But
How did I not see it?
yeah, my mind was only going that way, and I realized, oh, I should have gone that way. So that, again, I can't give any spoilers here, but that's a key thing in
Yes.
the book. People needing to redirect the track of thought they're on
Yes.
in order to solve something. They have to redirect it.
Yes. And I love that so much because for kids, we just think of life as a line, actually, just barely in an episode. And I don't know where it will air in actually
Mhm.
chronologically on Book Huddle, but that life is not linear. It's a
Right.
plane and things happen at different points on this
Yeah.
plane. And so encouraging children not to think so linearly, that you don't have to keep proceeding down this certain strict line of thinking. Like
Yeah.
explore it and look at it, step over here and then look at
Yeah.
it. Like how we
Right.
had to
Right.
turn the book and look in
Yeah.
different ways.
Exactly.
And yeah, I
Uh-huh.
love it a lot.
Uh-huh.
So what I was thinking about was how, there's this big thing that a character makes a decision. And actually, there's multiple characters that do this, but I'm thinking of one in particular, and you'll know what I'm thinking of. So everybody else go read it and you can figure out what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
But somebody makes a decision and it affects everything in such a major way. And the characters don't think of people so poorly when this happens. You know what I mean? They could just be
Hmm.
like, "Oh, you're the worst. You made this
Hmm.
happen," right? And so
Hmm.
I love this that in the book, I feel like kids can definitely relate to this when they see characters have this happen, that they're like, a bad choice was made, and there's forgiveness, and there's a path forward.
Hmm.
And so I love that that's kind of throughout, like I said, with multiple characters.
That is an element of this story. And you can mess up, you can make some mistakes, do some really rough things, and but there are people who will, acknowledge that you did something wrong, but they'll also kind of give you the grace to maybe do better next time. So I definitely work that into this story. There's a few characters who go through that in
Yes.
different at different times, and
Right.
sometimes they're actually in a way maybe not fully in control of what they're
Right,
doing.
right.
They're
It's not
they're
always
being
completely their fault.
influenced
Right.
but they need to understand how much were they maybe responsible for allowing themselves to be influenced, I
Yes.
suppose. So, but
Yes.
that note of forgiveness is a big one throughout the book. Kids want to feel that there's hope, even if anyone does want to feel there's hope,
Yeah. When
even
you
if
make a
you've
mistake.
maybe made an error along the way. So yeah,
Right.
that's definitely in the book.
Yeah, and I feel like even with the main characters, that relating to that, there's this big thing of you need to have somebody to believe in you. That there's one character that just feels so crushed when he's like, well, I didn't even make this decision. I just interacted with somebody. You know what I mean? He's
Yeah,
just like, oh my gosh, and you just don't believe in me anymore. Like
yeah,
it could affect their relationship in a big way because
yeah,
he's just crushed that he doesn't have somebody to believe in him like he used to. And so I
yeah.
think that is important too, that we all need somebody to believe in us.
That's a really great point. As I mentioned earlier, I was a school teacher for many years, in my 20s, and I don't know how like effective I was or how good I was. I guess I put a lot of energy into it and tried my best, but anyone early in their profession maybe is still finding their way. But one thing that I always thought about, even when like from my first year of teaching onward, was these are young people here in this classroom, and some of them don't want to be here, and
Right.
some of them have had really hard things going on in their lives. And I'm just a guy who shows up for 45 minutes in their life, and gosh, I don't want to make their day any worse. I don't want to like beat them down. I don't want to. It's not always easy. Sometimes, to be frank, someone who's 14 or 15 or 16, maybe they don't even want to be disagreeable, but they are in your classroom. But
We're
I
all
I
disagreeable at
always
times in life, aren't we?
I always wanted to try to figure out like, how can I maybe show a little kindness to this person and maybe let them see that there's, that at least for 45 minutes, I'm not going to be the guy to kind of tear them down or try to shame them or something like that. I don't know if that's quite as far as saying I believe in you, but I did try to do that. I would always
Yeah.
try to find sort of the good angles of people as best I can. I would often think like, I remember what it was like to sit
Right.
in that classroom. I don't want someone up front there to berate me just because they feel powerful or something. So
Right.
that thing about believing in people is really important. And doing that for a young person can make a huge difference in their life.
Yeah.
Someone can turn when they're 12 or 13. If an adult comes at them the wrong way, they can be like, I'm done. Like
Yeah.
I'm
It's
not
not
going
worth
to
my
try
time.
anymore at school. I'm checking out of this. But the right word from the right teacher at the right time or the right adult in their life can
Yeah.
make a huge difference in bolstering a kid's self-esteem. So I won't go too far on it. I know I messed up times here and there, but that was the guiding principle for me very often when I was a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. And so much for all of us in our life. We just
Yeah.
We need that kind word. We need that encouragement. Yeah,
Right, right.
absolutely. What book would you love to recommend for our audience?
I once had the pleasure of being on a virtual panel with Cornelia Funk, who wrote
Oh,
Inkheart
that's
there.
fun.
She wrote a book that I just love, and I want to recommend it to your readers or any other readers. It's called The Thief Lord. And
I love The Thief Lord.
oh, me too. I've probably read it 10
And
or
I
more
don't even
times.
remember why. I just
Well,
remember the
it's
well.
kind of the magic of the book because there aren't really like any villains in the book. There's a little bit of magic that grows more towards the end of the story, but really for the first two-thirds of the book, there's no real magic.
Right?
It is hard to put your finger on why that book is so appealing. The way the characters relate, there's a lot of mysterious elements, but basically it's kids who are presented with one mysterious circumstance after the next that they need to resolve. There's no like villain or bad guy who's like, coming up against them. It's just kids putting their minds up against a series of suspenseful situations that they need to solve. And they enlist adults to help them out, and the kids and the adults get along all like they're all a team. And
Yes.
it's a really wonderful story. I love it. I
Yeah.
just reread the book about 2 or 3 months ago, and I wrote her an email. I said, because I found her website. I
Yes.
said, gosh, your book has given me so much pleasure and joy and enjoyment over the years. I've read it, at least 10 or 12 times.
Yeah.
Thank you for writing such a great book. And her sister wrote me back. Her sister said, Cornelia gets a million emails and I take care of her website. And
Right.
thank you, Ben, for writing to me. Really appreciate your note. So that was a thrill to get that. But I was on a panel with Cornelia once, and I'm sitting there. There's like four of us, and she's in Germany, and I'm here in the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
And I was like, wow, I'm on a panel with Cornelia Funk. It
That's so
felt
cool.
really, really cool to see her there next to me. So
Like
anyway, I
kind
just
of.
wanted to give that plug for her book, The Thief Lord, because I love it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I love it. I love the book. So everybody, this is recently out, The Shadow of the
Uh-huh.
World Famous Nine. And if you want, go back and read the other one just within, I think it's been 3 weeks that I did both books, great reads. And so I hope people will go out and read these books. And thank you so
Nice.
much, Ben, for taking the time to talk about this with us.
Thank you, Karen. Great conversation. I really appreciate you being inviting me on here. It was a
Of course.
thrill for me to talk to you. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed hearing about The Shadow of the World Famous Nine. If you like my podcast, Book Huddle with Readgab, I'd really appreciate it if you take a second and rate and review it on your podcast platform. That helps more listeners find Book Huddle. Now go and have a great week and read some amazing books.